This is a book review of Ayn Rand Answers, the best of her Q&A, and it is edited by Robert Mayhew. And so this is basically a collection of transcribed interview questions and, of course, her answers to those questions over a couple decades, I think from the 1960s through the 1980s. And basically, it's for anybody who, like myself, is a bit of an Ayn Rand nerd and wants to just hear more from her, right? So she talks about a wide variety of subjects, and she's, asked different questions. People found her interesting. They wanted to hear what her take was on a wide variety of topics, not just ethics and morality and politics, but things like modern art, Ernest Hemingway, atheism, abortion, gun control, love and marriage, capitalism, prostitution, homosexuality, literature, drug use, freedom of the press, chess, comedy, suicide, masculinity, and more, right? So, a very wide variety of subject matters that she covers. And so you get to kind of get a better idea of what she was like as a person and what she thought personally. Now, it's important, and the editors discuss this in the introduction to the book, that you keep in mind that her answers are not strictly her. This does not necessarily reflect her objectivist philosophy, right? She is taking answers on the fly, on TV, live, and just saying what came to her head, right? She didn't get to think of it carefully, and she didn't uh, promote it as part of her philosophy, objectivism. These were just her personal opinions. Obviously, she talks about objectivism, and she is an objectivist, but these are her personal opinions largely. And I'll just read a few of my favorite questions and answers. So this one, she's talking about basically why altruism is necessary for dictatorships, and that you can't have a dictatorship without having altruism. So here what she says. Every dictatorship uses the altruist morality to make men sacrifice themselves or bear self-sacrifices. But when someone says you have the right to live for your own sake, but have no right to sacrifice anyone else, you may be sure he's not a dictator. No dictator could last or even come to power by telling the individual that he has the right to his own life, and that the state has no right to force him to do anything. Try to project, as science fiction, how a dictator could come to power and then rule without using the altruist morality. It's impossible. By contrast, the Declaration of Independence, which contains the objectivist morality by implication, says man has a right to his own life, his own liberty, and the pursuit of his own happiness. It doesn't mention service to others. Observe what kind of magnificent, benevolent society resulted. That should be enough to convince you. A even more controversial answer, one of my favorites, and I'd recommend hearing it in her voice. It's funny the way that she says it. This one is, could you comment on feminism? She says, I am profoundly anti-feminist because it's a phony movement. To begin with, it's Marxist-Leninist in origin. It wants to have its cake and eat it too. It wants, quote, independence for women, government-funded independence supported by taxes, extorted from whom? From men whose equals they claim to be. But men did not get established in this country with the help of the government. If women want to be equal, and of course, potentially they are, then they should achieve it on their own and not as a vicious parasitical pressure group. Um, and so you can see, she has very sharp answers, like them or not. She was, uh, she had hot takes, as we would say today. Here's another one that is interesting and not often heard in today's discourse on education. The question is, why is so much money spent on helping children with mental problems and so little on bright children who would have more possibilities? She says, I have been saying this for years, that before we help the helpless, who can only be lifted a little, we should see to it that we help the talented children the child prodigies who need support desperately. They don't need financial help. What they need is freedom and private schools in which they be free to rise as fast as possible without being held down to the community standards of the average child. The people who prefer to help the mentally weak and neglect or actually hinder the talented are the most unjust, evil people on earth. So, again, another hot take on that. Love it or hate it. And a final question and answer I'll share. I'll share the start and the end of it. Is this question: what's the difference between a person who is well trained in his field and someone who is exceptional? Starts off with: the exceptional person has premises leading to an active mind. He doesn't rest too easily at one level of his own development, and he doesn't take too much as given. She ends the question with this paragraph: I'm not saying it's never proper to accept the standards of your profession, but this is a beginner's premise. It's fine for the beginner to hold that the expected values or the expected standards are valid and to comply with them. But it's when one knows the essentials, what's been discovered so far, that the distinction between the men and the boys appears. The man will want to go a step further, and if it's more than one step, so much the better. The exceptional man does not stand still and does not take the acquisition of knowledge from others as his permanent state. So those were just a few examples of some of her answers to the questions. There's a very wide variety. Obviously, she has very hot takes. And so if you're the type of person that kind of has enjoyed listening to some of her interviews, perhaps on YouTube, I found that this was me as I was reading more about objectivism and Ayn Rand. I remember reading Atlas Shrugged and thinking it was so silly the way that some of the characters loved to listen to John Galt just because of how great and coherent and rational he was. And I was like, come on, like, how rational is this guy that he's just a pleasure to listen to? But I found myself that way with Ayn Rand, just watching her interviews. It was just such a pleasure to listen to somebody so reasonable and intelligent and concise. I enjoyed listening to her. I have enjoyed listening to many of her interviews. And so getting this book was a no-brainer for me. It's just a more complete compilation of her questions and answers.